The waste disposal chute made a horrible grinding noise that echoed through the empty corridor. Leonard Harris pulled his jacket tighter and checked his work tablet again. Third malfunction this week, and he was the only maintenance worker on duty for the entire night shift. Frostpoint Station never had enough people to keep things running properly, but that was life on an ice moon nobody cared about. He grabbed his toolkit and headed toward the exterior airlock. The mining station sat on Callisto 7, a frozen rock where temperatures dropped low enough to turn metal brittle. Most of the crew stayed in the warm sections, but maintenance workers like Leonard went wherever the breakdowns happened. The airlock hissed open and bitter cold slammed into him despite his thermal suit. His breath formed clouds inside his helmet as he climbed down the metal ladder toward the disposal system. Ice crystals had formed on every surface, making each step dangerous. One slip, and he would fall 30 meters on a frozen ground. His scanner beeped. Something was wrong with the readings. The thermal detector showed a heat signature in the waste chute, which made no sense. Nothing living could survive out here, and all the disposed materials should be frozen solid by now. Leonard reached the chute access panel and forced it open with a crowbar. Ice cracked and fell away. He aimed his flashlight inside and froze that a small creature lay curled in the corner, barely moving. It was no bigger than a cat, with scales that looked like crystal or glass. Tiny wings were folded against its body, and a weak glow came from somewhere inside it. The creature shivered, and Leonard realized it was dying, that he knew what it was. Everyone in the galaxy knew about dragons, even if most humans had never seen one. They were powerful, ancient, and they ruled an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. They definitely did not belong in garbage chutes on forgotten mining stations. Leonard should have called his supervisor immediately. This was way above his security clearance. Dragons meant politics, regulations, and paperwork that could take months. But the creature made a small sound, like a kitten crying, and its glow dimmed even more as he made his decision in seconds. Leonard reached in carefully and scooped the tiny dragon into his arms. It was freezing cold, much colder than it should be. He tucked it inside his jacket against his chest and sealed his thermal suit around it. The creature stirred weakly but did not resist. Getting back to his quarters without being seen took careful timing. Leonard knew the security camera schedules by heart after 5 years on the station. He slipped through maintenance corridors, avoiding the main halls where other crew members might spot him. His room was small and plain, just a bed, desk, and storage locker. He laid the dragon on his bed and wrapped it in every blanket he owned. The creature was still shivering, its scales dull and lifeless. Leonard cranked up the room temperature as high as it would go and pulled out his space heater, positioning it near the bed. He spent the next hour searching the Galactic database for information about dragon biology. Most of it was restricted or classified. Dragons guarded their secrets carefully, but he found a few public medical files meant for emergency responders. Dragons needed high temperatures to survive, much higher than human comfort levels. They also required specific minerals in their diet. Leonard raided the station kitchen for protein paste and checked the mineral content. It was not perfect, but it was close to what the database recommended. He mixed it with warm water and tried to feed the tiny dragon with a spoon at first. Nothing happened. The creature just lay there, barely breathing. Leonard talked to it softly, the way he used to talk to his sister's cat back on Earth. He told it about the station, about the ice moon, about how he ended up working maintenance on the edge of nowhere. After 20 minutes, the dragon's eyes opened. They were crystalline blue, bright and aware. The creature looked at Leonard for a long moment, then opened its mouth and accepted a small amount of the food mixture. Leonard felt relief wash over him. He fed the dragon slowly, letting it take breaks. After eating, the creature's glow grew slightly brighter. Its scales began to shimmer with faint rainbow colors. It made a small chirping sound and nestled into the blankets. By morning, the dragon was still alive. Leonard had not slept at all. He sat on the floor next to his bed, watching the creature breathe. Its body temperature had stabilized, and it seemed to be resting peacefully. His work tablet beeped with the start of the day's shift. Leonard silenced it and looked at the dragon. He could not keep this secret forever. The station was too small, the security too tight. Eventually, someone would find out. But right now, this tiny creature needed him. It trusted him. And Leonard could not shake the feeling that something important was happening, something that went beyond regulations and protocols. He named her Crystal because of how her scales caught the light. The decision to hide her lasted exactly 8 hours. His supervisor, Dan, knocked on his door during the afternoon, responding to the unregistered life sign that station sensors had detected in Leonard's quarters. Dan was a decent guy, and he looked genuinely worried. Leonard tried to explain, but Dan cut him off. Protocol required reporting any alien life forms immediately. No exceptions. He gave Leonard 1 hour to bring Crystal to the command center voluntarily, or security would come get her. Leonard moved Crystal to an abandoned maintenance tunnel in the lower decks, a section of the station that had been closed for repairs 3 years ago. Nobody went down there anymore. He made her a nest from thermal blankets and brought her food and water. She watched him with those intelligent blue eyes, and Leonard wondered if she understood that he was trying to protect her. That evening, the station-wide alarm went off. Every screen in Frostpoint displayed the same emergency message. A Dragon Empire diplomatic vessel had entered the system and was approaching at high speed. They were demanding immediate permission to board the station. They were searching for something. Leonard's blood ran cold as he read the message again. The dragons had come looking for their lost hatchling, and when they found her, they would take her away. He looked at the security feed showing the lower decks, where Crystal slept peacefully in her hidden nest. Everything was about to change, and Leonard had no idea if he had made the right choice by saving her. 3 massive shapes descended from the diplomatic vessel onto Frostpoint Station's main docking bay. Leonard watched from the maintenance control room, hidden behind banks of monitors showing security feeds from across the facility. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the console. The dragons were enormous. The largest one had dark gray scales that looked like polished stone and stood nearly 3 meters tall. His wings were folded tight against his back, and his eyes scanned the docking bay with cold precision. A second dragon, female with pure white scales, carried herself with scholarly grace. The third had copper-colored scales and wore armor that marked him as military. Station Commander Williams met them with his best diplomatic smile, but Leonard could see the sweat on his forehead even through the grainy security feed. Dragons rarely visited human outposts, and never without serious reason. The gray dragon spoke first. His voice carried through the intercom system, deep and commanding. "I am High Commander Slate of the Dragon Empire. This is Archivist Frost and Guard Captain Bronze. We are invoking Emergency Protocol 17 under Galactic Law. You will cooperate fully." Williams nodded quickly. "Of course, Commander. How can we assist you?" Slate's expression remained unchanged. 3 weeks ago, one of our transport vessels was attacked by pirates near this system. An emergency escape pod was jettisoned during the conflict. The pod contained a hatchling of royal blood. We have tracked its beacon to this area. Leonard felt his stomach drop. Royal blood. Crystal was not just any dragon. She was nobility. Archivist Frost stepped forward, her white scales shimmering under the station lights. "The hatchling cannot survive more than 1 month without proper care. Time is critical. If she has perished, we must recover her remains for proper ceremony." Guard Captain Bronze's tail lashed behind him. "If anyone on this station has taken the hatchling for ransom or political leverage, they will face the full consequences of dragon law. This is not negotiable." Williams raised his hands in a calming gesture. "I assure you, Commander, we have seen no such pod or hatchling. Our sensors would have detected any landing in this sector." "Your sensors are inferior," Bronze said bluntly. "We will conduct our own search. Prepare to grant us full access to all areas of this station." Leonard watched as the meeting continued. The dragons described Crystal in detail, her crystalline scales, her blue eyes, her royal lineage. They spoke of succession crises and political implications. They mentioned the Emperor himself was watching this situation closely, but not once did they talk about Crystal as a person. Not once did they mention worry for her well-being or fear for her safety. Everything was political calculation and imperial protocol. A hand touched Leonard's shoulder, and he jumped. Rita stood behind him, her dark eyes serious. "We need to talk. Now." They moved to a storage closet where the security cameras had blind spots. Rita crossed her arms and stared at him. "You found it, didn't you? The dragon hatchling. That's what you've been hiding." Leonard considered lying, but Rita had worked with him for 3 years. She knew him too well. "Yes." She was dying in the waste chute. "I couldn't just leave her there." "Leonard, those are dragons. They're talking about tearing this station apart, looking for her. You need to hand her over before this gets worse." "Did you hear them?" Leonard asked. "They don't care about her. They care about bloodlines and succession and politics. That hatchling has a name. Crystal. She's scared and alone, and she trusts me." Rita's expression softened. "Show me." They took the service elevator to the lower decks. The abandoned maintenance section was dark and cold, lit only by emergency lighting. Crystal had grown in just the day since Leonard found her, now the size of a medium dog. When she saw Leonard, she made happy chirping sounds and ran to him on awkward legs. Rita watched in silence as Crystal climbed onto Leonard's shoulders and nuzzled against his neck. The dragon hatchling's scales glowed with warmth and contentment. "She bonded with you," Rita said quietly. "I've read about this. Dragons don't bond with other species. Ever. Maybe they just never tried," Leonard said, stroking Crystal's head. She made a purring sound that seemed impossible for a creature made of scales. Above them, through the ventilation system, they could hear the dragons moving through the station. Bronze's voice echoed through the corridors, demanding access to crew quarters. Williams was trying to maintain order, but the situation was deteriorating quickly. Crystal suddenly went still. Her head tilted, listening. Then she began to glow brighter, and a soft distress call emerged from her throat. It was not loud, but it carried through the metal walls and pipes of the station. Rita grabbed Leonard's arm. "They're going to hear that. You have maybe 2 minutes before they zero in on this location." Leonard looked down at Crystal. She was trembling, pressed against him for protection. He could run deeper into the maintenance tunnels, try to hide her better, or he could face the dragons and hope they would understand what he had done and why. The choice was taken from him. Bronze's voice boomed through the corridor outside. "I hear her. Level 3, maintenance sector. All units converge." Leonard picked up Crystal and held her close. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, not sure if he was reassuring her or himself. He walked out of the maintenance tunnel and into the main corridor. The 3 dragons stood at the end of the hallway, backlit by the harsh station lights. They looked like legends come to life, powerful and ancient and utterly alien. Then they saw Crystal in Leonard's arms, and everything stopped. High Commander Slate's eyes widened. Archivist Frost made a sound of pure shock. Guard Captain Bronze took a step back, his military composure cracking, because Crystal was healthy. Alert. Her scales glowed with vibrant color. She looked at the 3 adult dragons and then deliberately hid her face against Leonard's chest, choosing the human over her own kind. Slate found his voice first. "What have you done to her?" The conference room felt too small with 3 adult dragons inside it. Leonard sat in a standard station chair, while Crystal remained perched on his lap, her tail wrapped around his wrist. Commander Williams stood in the corner, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Rita had been asked to leave, though Leonard knew she was watching through the security feeds. High Commander Slate paced back and forth, his massive form making the floor vibrate with each step. "Explain yourself, human. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." Leonard took a breath and told them everything. Finding Crystal in the waste chute, nearly frozen to death. Bringing her to his quarters. Feeding her, keeping her warm, staying awake all night to make sure she survived. Moving her to the lower decks when he realized how much trouble he would face. Archivist Frost listened with intense focus, occasionally making notes on a device that looked like Crystal but functioned like a tablet. Guard Captain Bronze stood with his arms crossed, his expression growing darker with every word. When Leonard finished, Slate stopped pacing. "You violated multiple protocols. You concealed the presence of a dragon hatchling. You interfered with Imperial property." "She's not property," Leonard said quietly. "She's a person." Bronze slammed his fist on the table. "You have no right to make such determinations. You are human. Short-lived." Primitive. You cannot possibly understand what you have done. Crystal hissed at Bronze, and a small puff of frost escaped her mouth. The adult dragons all stared. Impossible whispered. Hatchlings do not develop breath abilities until at least 6 months of age. She cannot be more than 4 weeks old. Leonard stroked Crystal's head, and she calmed immediately. She started doing that yesterday. Is that bad? It should not be possible, Frost repeated. She looked at Slate. Commander, I request permission to observe their interaction more closely. This is unprecedented. Slate nodded slowly. Proceed. For the next hour, Frost asked Leonard to demonstrate how he cared for Crystal. He showed them the feeding routine he had developed, mixing protein paste with mineral supplements. He explained how he monitored her temperature and adjusted the heating elements. He talked to her in soft tones, and she responded with chirps and body language that clearly showed affection. The dragons watched in complete silence. Finally, Frost spoke. This bonding pattern matches historical records from over 50,000 years ago, before the Great Reformation, before we became civilized. What does that mean? Leonard asked. It means, Slate said heavily, that you have somehow triggered primitive instincts in the hatchling. She is imprinted on you as a parent figure. Bronze stepped forward, which is exactly why we must separate them immediately. The hatchling's mind must be cleansed of this contamination before it becomes permanent. Cleansed. Leonard held Crystal tighter. What does that mean? Re-education. Bronze said coldly. Isolation until the improper bonds fade. It is standard procedure for hatchlings exposed to negative influences. Crystal began to glow brighter. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Frost's eyes widened. She is entering a defensive state. Everyone remained calm. The only thing making her defensive is you threatening to take her away from me, Leonard said. He stood up carefully, still holding Crystal. Look at her. Really look at her. She's healthy. She's happy. She's developing faster than normal. How is any of that contamination? Slate raised one clawed hand for silence. The human raises a valid point. The hatchling shows no signs of distress or damage. Quite the opposite. Because he has manipulated her, Bronze insisted. Humans are clever. They use emotional tricks to achieve their goals. This is clearly some form of leverage attempt. For what purpose? Frost asked. What would a maintenance worker gain from secretly raising a dragon hatchling? He did not contact authorities. He did not demand payment. He simply cared for her. Bronze had no answer for that. Slate made a decision. We will take both the hatchling and the human to the homeworld. The Imperial Council must see this situation firsthand. No, Bronze said. The human stays here. The hatchling goes with us. And if separation causes the hatchling distress? Frost asked. We have already seen her reaction to perceived threats. If she becomes unstable during transport, it could be dangerous. Slate looked at Leonard. You will accompany us to Eternal Frost. You will present your case before the Imperial Council. They will decide what happens to both of you. Leonard felt cold fear settle in his stomach. And if they decide against me, then you will be separated from the hatchling permanently, Slate said. And you will face consequences for your interference with Imperial matters. What kind of consequences? That is not my decision to make. Crystal made a small questioning sound and looked up at Leonard with her blue crystalline eyes. She did not understand what was happening, but she knew something was wrong. Leonard made his choice then. He would go with her. He would face whatever came, because the alternative was abandoning her, and he could not do that. When do we leave? He asked. Within the hour, Slate said. Gather your essential belongings. You may not return to this station for quite some time. Rita met Leonard at his quarters as he packed a small bag. She hugged him tightly. This is insane. You're going to the dragon homeworld because you saved a baby dragon. This is like something from a story. I know, Leonard said. But what else can I do? You could run. We could hide you both. Steal a ship. Leonard shook his head. Then I'd be a fugitive and Crystal would never be safe. At least this way, we have chance. Rita pulled back and looked at him seriously. You really care about her, don't you? Not because she's a dragon or royalty. Just because she's her. She was dying and scared, Leonard said simply. Someone had to help. The dragon vessel Eternal Winter was waiting in the docking bay. It was beautiful and terrifying, made of materials that looked like ice and crystal, but were stronger than any human metal. Leonard carried Crystal up the boarding ramp, aware that he was leaving everything familiar behind. The ship's interior was freezing cold and filled with dragons who stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Frost showed him to small quarters that had been hastily modified for human habitation. As the ship prepared for departure, Leonard stood at a viewport and watched Frost Point Station grow smaller. Crystal curled against his chest, trusting and warm. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," he whispered. The stars blurred as the ship entered faster-than-light travel, carrying them toward the heart of an ancient empire and an uncertain future. Life aboard Eternal Winter followed rhythms completely alien to Leonard. The ship operated on a 20-hour cycle instead of 24, and every surface was cold enough to make his breath fog. Archivist Frost had arranged for heating elements in his quarters, but stepping into the corridors felt like walking into a freezer. Crystal adapted immediately. She grew larger each day, now the size of a Great Dane, and her scales had developed intricate patterns that caught light like prisms. She followed Leonard everywhere, and the Dragon crew members gave them both wide berth in the hallways that on the third day of travel, Frost invited Leonard to her study. The room was filled with crystal tablets and holographic displays showing dragon history. She gestured for him to sit, though the furniture was designed for creatures with tails and wings. "I have been researching the bonding phenomenon," Frost said without preamble. "It should not be possible. Dragon hatchlings are raised in communal facilities with environmental controls and educational programming. They do not form attachments to individuals." Leonard watched Crystal explore the study, sniffing at tablets and batting playfully at holographic displays. "Maybe that's the problem." Frost's head tilted. "Explain." "You said hatchlings are raised in facilities, by programs and environmental controls, not by actual parents." Leonard chose his words carefully. "On Earth, we tried that once. Raising children in institutions with perfect care, but no personal attention. The children did not develop properly. They needed emotional connection, not just food and shelter." "Dragons are not humans," Frost said, but her tone was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "No, but maybe all intelligent species need some form of bonding. Maybe that's what makes us intelligent in the first place." Frost was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up data on her displays. "Dragon birth rates have been declining for 3,000 years. We attributed this to natural population control. But hatchling survival rates have also decreased. Many simply fail to thrive despite perfect environmental conditions." "What happens to them?" Leonard asked. "They are studied, analyzed. Eventually, most are euthanized when it becomes clear they will not develop properly." Frost's voice remained clinical, but Leonard caught something underneath it. "Doubt, perhaps. Or guilt. That's horrible. That is efficiency. Resources are not infinite." Crystal returned to Leonard and climbed onto his lap, even though she was getting too big for it. She made a contented rumbling sound and rested her head on his shoulder. Frost watched them with an expression Leonard could not read. "She speaks your name in her dreams," Frost said quietly. "I have monitored her sleep patterns. She dreams of you constantly. This level of attachment is documented in our oldest histories, but has not been seen in living memory." Before Leonard could respond, alarms blared through the ship. Bronze's voice echoed over the intercom. "All hands to stations. We have company." Leonard followed Frost to the bridge, carrying Crystal. The view screen showed 3 smaller vessels approaching, their hull markings identifying them as dragons, but from a different faction. Slate stood at the command position, his expression grim. "They are loyalists to Lord Obsidian. He leads the traditionalist faction on the council." "What do they want?" Leonard asked. "To prevent us from reaching the homeworld with you and the hatchling. Obsidian sees your existence as a threat to dragon culture. He has sent these ships to intercept us." Bronze turned from his weapons console. "Commander, they are hailing us. Put it through." A dragon with black scales and golden eyes appeared on the screen. "Hi, Commander Slate. You are ordered to hand over the human and the contaminated hatchling. They will be taken into custody for the good of the Empire." By whose authority? Slate demanded. Lord Obsidian speaks with the authority of tradition and purity. That human has corrupted a royal hatchling. The damage must be contained. Crystal hissed at the screen and pressed closer to Leonard. He could feel her trembling. The Slate's voice was cold as ice. I answer to the Empress, not to council members who overstep their bounds. Stand down or face the consequences. You would fight your own kind to protect a human. The Black Dragon sounded genuinely shocked. I would fight anyone who threatens my mission. The Empress herself ordered me to bring both the hatchling and her guardian to the homeworld. I will not fail in this duty. The transmission cut off. Moments later, the three ships opened fire. Eternal Winter shields absorbed the first impacts, but the ship rocked hard enough to throw Leonard off his feet. He wrapped himself around Crystal, protecting her with his body. Dragons ran to combat stations with military precision. Return fire, Slate ordered. Disable their engines, but avoid fatal damage. They are still our people. The battle lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. Leonard had never been in combat before, and the sound were terrifying. Crystal whimpered against him, her glow flickering with fear. He talked to her constantly, telling her everything would be okay, even though he had no idea if that was true. Finally, Bronze reported 2 vessels disabled. The third is retreating. Let it go, Slate said. We need to reach the homeworld quickly. Obsidian will have more forces waiting. Frost helped Leonard to his feet. Are you injured? I'm Euphine. Is Crystal okay? He checked her over carefully. She seemed shaken but unhurt. The hatchling's safety was your first concern, Frost observed, even when your own life was in danger. Of course it was. This is not of course to us, Frost said softly. This is what I have been trying to understand. You act on instinct to protect her, without calculation or consideration of benefit. This is the bonding behavior our histories describe. Slate approached them. Leonard Harris, you should know what we face. Obsidian commands significant support on the council. He will argue that you have damaged the hatchling beyond repair. He will present evidence that human influence weakens dragons. And he will demand that Crystal be taken from you and subjected to re-education. What can I do? Show them what I have seen on this voyage. That Crystal is not damaged. That she is thriving. That perhaps our way of raising hatchlings is what needs to change, not your methods. Slate paused. I cannot promise the council will listen, but I will speak in your favor. Why? Leonard asked. Why would you help me? Slate looked at Crystal, who had fallen asleep in Leonard's arms despite the recent danger. Because in 5,000 years of military service, I have never seen a hatchling show such advanced development. And I have never seen one demonstrate such clear happiness. If we are wrong about how to raise our young, then our entire civilization is built on a flawed foundation. That is worth investigating, regardless of my personal feelings about humans. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the viewport, Leonard saw a planet that took his breath away. It was covered in ice and crystal, with cities that looked like they had been carved from diamonds. Eternal frost, the dragon homeworld, and somewhere on that planet, the Imperial Council was waiting to judge him. The Imperial Palace made Frost Point Station look like a toy. It rose from the frozen landscape like a mountain of diamond and ice, with towers that pierced the clouds. Thousands of dragons flew between spires, and Leonard could see entire cities carved into the palace's lower levels. Guards escorted him and Crystal through corridors so vast that his footsteps echoed for seconds. Dragons stopped to stare as they passed. Some looked curious. Others looked hostile. All of them seemed shocked to see a human walking freely in their most sacred place. The council chamber was circular and enormous, with 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle. Each throne was carved from a different type of crystal and held a dragon whose scales matched the stone. These were the rulers of the Dragon Empire, ancient and powerful beyond Leonard's understanding. The center throne held Empress Diamond. Her scales were pure white, almost transparent, and her eyes were clouded with age. Frost had told Leonard she was over 20,000 years old. She turned her head toward them as they entered, and Leonard realized she was blind but somehow still saw everything. Approach, Her voice resonated through the chamber like music through crystal. Leonard walked forward with Crystal at his side. Hundreds of dragons filled the observation galleries above, all watching in silence. He had never felt so small. Lord Obsidian sat on the black crystal throne to the Empress's left, his golden eyes fixed on Leonard with open contempt. Your Majesty, this hearing is a waste of time. The human should be imprisoned for theft and corruption of imperial property. The hatchling should be placed in isolation immediately. The human has a name, Slate said from where he stood with frost and bronze. Leonard Harris. And he saved the hatchling's life. By interfering with natural selection, Obsidian countered. If the hatchling was meant to survive, she would have done so without primitive mammalian intervention. Another council member spoke, this one with scales like polished granite. Lord Granite, council member for scholarship. I would hear the human's account before rendering judgment. Leonard swallowed hard. Your Majesty, honored council members. I found Crystal dying in a waste disposal unit. She was freezing and starving. I did what anyone with compassion would do. I helped her. You concealed her presence, Obsidian said. You did not report finding imperial property. She's not property, Leonard said again. She's a living being who was in pain. I don't care if she's royalty or what political implications there are. She needed help, and I gave it. A murmur ran through the observation galleries. Dragons did not speak to council members this way. Empress Diamond raised one clawed hand for silence. Show us this bond you claim to have formed. Leonard knelt down next to Crystal. She had grown nervous in this vast chamber full of strange dragons, pressing close to his side. He stroked her head gently and spoke to her in soft tones, telling her she was safe, that he was here. Crystal's glow brightened. She made happy chirping sounds and nuzzled against him. Then she did something that made every dragon in the chamber go still. She sang that IT was a simple melody, just a few notes, but it was clear and pure. Dragons did not sing. Their histories mentioned singing from ancient times, but the practice had been abandoned millennia ago as primitive and emotional. Crystal was singing a lullaby Leonard had hummed to her during their journey. Impossible, Obsidian whispered. Frost stepped forward. Your Majesty, I have documented the hatchling's development during our voyage. She shows cognitive advancement 30% beyond normal parameters. Her breath abilities manifested months ahead of schedule. Her emotional intelligence is remarkable. All of this correlates directly with her bond to Leonard Harris. Or it proves that human influence has made her abnormal, Obsidian argued. This is exactly why hatchlings must be raised in controlled environments. Individual attachment creates unpredictability. Lord Granite spoke again. What if unpredictability is what we have been missing? Our hatchling survival rates continue to decline. Perhaps there is wisdom in examining alternative methods. There is no wisdom in returning to primitive practices, Obsidian said coldly. We evolved beyond such weakness for good reason. Empress Diamond's voice cut through the debate. We will test the bond's necessity. Leonard Harris will be removed from the chamber. The hatchling will remain with us. If she adapts quickly, the bond is proven superficial. No, Leonard said, then caught himself. I mean, Your Majesty, please don't do this. It will terrify her. If the bond is as important as you claim, a brief separation should cause minimal distress, Diamond said. Guards, escort the human to the waiting chamber. Two large dragons moved forward. Leonard looked at Crystal, trying to reassure her, but she began to panic immediately. Her scales flashed bright with alarm, and she tried to follow him as the guards pulled him away. The door closed behind Leonard, cutting him off from Crystal. He pressed against it, heart pounding. Through the thick crystal, he could hear her distress calls getting louder. Inside the chamber, Crystal's glow intensified to painful brightness. The temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the floor in expanding patterns. Crystal's calls became desperate, echoing telepathically through every dragon mind in the palace. 5 minutes in, young dragons in the nursery levels began to cry in response. 10 minutes in, the frost had spread to the observation galleries, and several dragons had to evacuate due to the cold. 15 minutes in, Crystal entered a full defensive state, ice forming in sharp spikes around her. The door burst open and Leonard ran through. Crystal, she flew to him, moving faster than she ever had before, and wrapped herself around him. Her distress calls cut off immediately. The temperature began to normalize. Her glow softened to its usual gentle radiance. The entire council chamber was silent. Empress Diamond spoke, her ancient voice thoughtful. The bond is real. The bond is powerful. And the bond is something we have not seen in our civilization for thousands of generations. She looked at Obsidian. You claim this is weakness. I see a hatchling who survived against impossible odds because one being cared enough to help her. Then she looked at Leonard. You have created a situation unprecedented in modern dragon history. The council must deliberate on what this means for our empire. You will remain in the palace as our guest until we reach a decision. What kind of decision? Leonard asked, still holding Crystal close. Whether your methods represent a threat to our way of life, Diamond said, or whether our way of life has been missing something crucial all along. The palace guest quarters were beautiful and isolating. Leonard spent 2 days waiting for the council's decision, allowed to walk certain corridors but always watched by guards. Dragons approach him constantly now, some hostile, others curious. A few asked quiet questions about how he cared for Crystal. On the third night, Lord Granite visited. The scholarly dragon settled his bulk carefully on the reinforced furniture and studied Leonard with thoughtful eyes. I have been reviewing historical records, Granite said. 20,000 years ago, dragons raised hatchlings in family groups. Parents sang to their young. Hatchlings bonded with specific adults. Our civilization was smaller then, but our population was stable and growing. What changed? Leonard asked. Efficiency. We centralized hatchling care, standardized education, removed emotional variables. Within 1,000 years, we built an empire spanning 40 star systems. Granite paused, but our birth rates began to decline. Slowly at first, then faster. Now we produce fewer hatchlings each generation, and fewer survive to adulthood. You're dying out, Leonard said quietly. Slowly, over millennia. But yes. Granite looked at Crystal, who was sleeping peacefully against Leonard's side. That hatchling should not be thriving. By our standards, everything about her development is wrong. Yet she is healthier and more advanced than any hatchling raised in our facilities. Because she knows she's loved, Leonard said. It's not complicated. She feels safe and cared for, so she can focus on growing instead of just surviving. Simple wisdom, Granite said. But we have forgotten how to see simple truths. I wanted you to know, Leonard Harris, that I will argue for your methods before the council, as will High Commander Slate and Archivist Frost. We may not prevail against Obsidian's faction, but we will try. After Granite left, Leonard held Crystal and wondered what would happen if the council ruled against them. Would they separate them by force? Would Crystal survive it? Would he? The summons came the next morning. The council had reached their decision. The chamber was even more crowded than before. Dragons packed the observation galleries, and Leonard could feel the tension in the air. This was about more than just him and Crystal now. This was about the future of their entire civilization. Empress Diamond waited until complete silence fell. Then she spoke. We have debated for 3 days. We have examined evidence. We have confronted difficult truths about our own culture. Her blind eyes seemed to look directly at Leonard. Leonard Harris, you have shown us something we thought we had outgrown. Emotional bonding between individuals. Personal care over institutional efficiency. The choice to value one life simply because it deserves to be valued. Obsidian shifted on his throne but remained silent. The question before us, Diamond continued, is whether these old ways have value in our modern empire. Lord Obsidian argues they are primitive weakness. Lord Granite argues they may be what we have lost. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I have made my decision. Leonard Harris will not be punished. Crystal will not be taken from him. Instead, we will establish a new program. The Guardian Initiative. Murmurs rippled through the galleries. Leonard Harris will be appointed first Guardian, Diamond declared. He will work with Archivist Frost and volunteers from our population to develop new methods for raising hatchlings. These methods will combine our traditional knowledge with the bonding practices Leonard has demonstrated. This is madness. Obsidian stood abruptly. You would change thousands of years of tradition based on one human's lucky accident. I would change our course before we slowly vanish from the galaxy, Diamond said sharply. Our current methods are failing. The evidence is clear. We can adapt, or we can die with our pride intact. I choose adaptation. She looked at the assembled dragons. This program is voluntary. Those who wish to participate may apply. Those who prefer traditional methods may continue as before. But we will study the results carefully. And if bonding practices prove beneficial, they will be expanded. Obsidian's expression was cold fury, but he bowed stiffly and resumed his seat. He was outvoted, and they both knew it. Diamond turned back to Leonard. Do you accept this responsibility, Leonard Harris? To teach dragons what you know about caring for their young. Leonard looked at Crystal, who watched him with complete trust. He thought about the hatchlings Frost had mentioned, the ones who failed to thrive and were euthanized. He thought about an entire civilization that had forgotten how to love their children. Yes, he said, I accept. 6 months later, Leonard stood in a facility that had once been a standard hatchling care center. It looked completely different now. Individual rooms replaced group dormitories. Soft materials covered harsh surfaces. And most importantly, 20 hatchlings were being raised by guardians who sang to them, played with them, and treated them as individuals rather than statistics. Crystal, now the size of a horse and elegant in her adolescence, helped him oversee the program. She had become famous across the galaxy. The dragon who chose a human, the bridge between two species. Human volunteers worked alongside dragons who had decided to try the old ways. Some were skeptical at first, but the results spoke for themselves. The hatchlings in the Guardian program showed remarkable development. They were healthier, more emotionally stable, and demonstrated problem-solving abilities that exceeded normal parameters. Frost visited often, documenting everything. Birth rates are increasing, she told Leonard one day. For the first time in 3,000 years. Dragons who participate in the Guardian program are choosing to have hatchlings when they would not have before. Because they want to be parents, Leonard said, not just producers of a next generation. News spread beyond the Dragon Empire. Other species watched in fascination as an ancient civilization transformed itself. Humanity's status in galactic politics shifted. They were no longer just another young species. They were the ones who had taught dragons how to feel again. Leonard received messages from Rita and others on Frostpoint Station, amazed at what he had accomplished. But he did not feel like he had accomplished anything extraordinary. He had just helped someone who needed help. One evening, he stood on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. Crystal landed beside him, her wings stirring the cold air. Thank you, she said in perfect dragon-human hybrid speech. For everything. Thank you for letting me help, Leonard replied. In the nursery below, hatchlings played with their guardians, learning and growing and loved. Songs drifted up through the crystal spires, melodies that had not been heard on this world for 20,000 years. The Dragon Empire had not fallen. It had remembered what it meant to be alive, and a maintenance worker from a forgotten ice moon had shown them the way home.